In life, we are taught to be kind, to be giving, to always say yes. But rarely are we taught the cost of always pleasing others. When you give too much of yourself without balance, you begin to disappear. Respect does not come from being agreeable. It comes from knowing your boundaries. Today, I want to remind you, stop being too friendly, not because kindness is weakness, but because uncontrolled friendliness is when you give too much of yourself without balance, you begin to disappear. This is a reality many people discover too late. From a young age, we are conditioned to believe that saying yes makes us good, that being available makes us kind, that being liked is a measure of our worth. And so, many walk through life wearing a mask of friendliness, constantly available, always agreeable, seeking approval from everyone around them. But what we often fail to understand is that this endless pursuit to be liked can silently erode our identity, our energy, and ultimately our self-respect. Being friendly is not a weakness, it is a beautiful human trait. But when friendliness becomes your default response, even when your intuition tells you otherwise, it becomes self-betrayal. It means you are placing the comfort of others above your own truth. Every time you say yes when your heart whispers no, a piece of your integrity is traded for temporary validation. Over time, this habit conditions your mind to associate self-worth with external approval, and slowly the voice inside you, the one that truly knows your boundaries, your limits, your values, starts to fade. You begin to notice that people don't listen to you the same way. They don't treat your time as valuable. They assume you'll always be there, always ready to help, always ready to bend. And why wouldn't they? You've shown them that you'll tolerate it. What you allow is what will continue. So, when you overextend yourself in the name of being friendly, you unintentionally teach others to undervalue you. The very people you try to please might begin to see you not as a respected individual, but as someone easily swayed, someone without firm ground to stand on. This pattern becomes especially dangerous when it affects your peace. How many times have you been overwhelmed, but still said yes to another commitment? How often have you kept silent in a situation that disrespected you, just to avoid conflict? These little moments seem harmless at first, but they add up. With each instance, your internal boundary gets weaker, your spirit a little more tired, your authenticity a little more dim. There is a fundamental difference between being kind and being too friendly. Kindness is strength. It comes from awareness, from groundedness. Kindness respects both others and the self, but being too friendly often comes from fear, fear of rejection, fear of being alone, fear of being seen as difficult or selfish. That fear drives you to give more than you should, to accommodate more than you can, to stretch beyond what's healthy. And the more you act from that fear, the further you drift from your center. You start losing the ability to say no with confidence. You hesitate to draw lines that protect your time, your energy, your mental clarity. You tell yourself it's just one more favor, one more compromise, one more moment of discomfort. But underneath, there's a silent exhaustion growing. You carry the weight of unsaid words, unmet needs, and unexpressed emotions. You begin to live a life that pleases everyone but yourself. This isn't about becoming cold or detached. It's about reclaiming balance. It's about recognizing that your energy is finite, your time is sacred, and your voice matters. When you understand that, you stop overgiving out of guilt. You stop over-accommodating out of habit. You begin to pause before saying yes, and you learn to say no without apology. That's not arrogance, it's self-awareness. In reality, people respect those who respect themselves. When you stand firm in your boundaries, when you communicate with clarity and calm, when you protect your peace, people notice. They may not like it at first, especially if they've grown used to your endless yes, but over time, they'll either adjust to the real you, or they'll walk away, and both outcomes are a form of freedom. To stop being too friendly doesn't mean you stop being good. It means you become wise with your goodness. It means you choose where your energy flows. It means you no longer live by the need to be liked, but by the need to be real. And from that place, your presence becomes stronger, your decisions become clearer, and your life begins to reflect the strength you had within you all along. Respect does not come from being agreeable. It comes from knowing your boundaries. This is one of the most misunderstood truths about human interaction. Many believe that by saying yes often, by always going along with what others want, they will earn favor, be appreciated, or be seen as respectful. But the paradox is this: the more you ignore your own boundaries to keep others comfortable, the more likely you are to lose their respect, and your own. Real respect is not built on how much you accommodate others. It's built on how clearly and consistently you define who you are and what you stand for. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are gates to protect what matters. They define the limits of your emotional, physical, and mental well-being. Without them, you become like a house with no doors, open to anyone at any time, vulnerable to anything they bring in. You may believe you're being generous, but what you're actually doing is sacrificing your own structure for the sake of external approval. And over time, people begin to treat you accordingly, not because they are unkind, but because you've never shown them where your line is. If you don't stand for your own boundaries, no one else will. There's a certain strength that radiates from someone who is grounded in their values. When you know what is acceptable to you, when you know where your limits are, you move through life with quiet confidence. You don't need to shout, argue, or prove anything. Your energy does it for you. Others sense it. They recognize that you are not easily swayed, not looking for validation, not desperate for attention. And in that groundedness, respect naturally arises, not because you demand it, but because you live it. Being agreeable often comes at a high cost. It may win you short-term harmony, but it usually leads to long-term discomfort. You find yourself in situations you didn't want to be in, committing to things you never wanted to do, staying silent in moments when you should have spoken. All of this is done to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to maintain appearances. But inside, something begins to break. Every time you betray your inner truth to accommodate someone else, a crack forms in your self-respect. Eventually, that crack becomes a fracture too large to ignore. People often confuse kindness with compliance, but the two are not the same. True kindness comes with clarity. It involves honesty, authenticity, and sometimes even discomfort. Because real kindness is not about making everyone happy. It's about doing what's right for yourself and others. Compliance, on the other hand, is often rooted in fear. Fear of rejection, fear of confrontation, fear of losing relationships. So you nod in agreement when you don't agree. You smile when you feel hurt. You help when you're already drained, and then, quietly, you begin to resent the very people you try to please. When you operate from this place, relationships become imbalanced. You give more than you receive. You listen more than you are heard. You adjust more than anyone adjusts for you. And though you may not express it, the imbalance takes a toll. You start to feel invisible in your own life, like a passenger rather than the driver. You begin to wonder why others don't show you the same consideration you show them. But the truth is, you've trained them to overlook you. By being overly agreeable, you've told them that your needs don't matter as much. Setting boundaries is not about confrontation. It's about communication. It's about having the courage to say, this is okay and this is not. It's about teaching others how to treat you, not through force, but through consistency. And yes, some people may resist. Some may question your change. They may accuse you of being selfish or distant. But what they're really reacting to is the discomfort of your clarity, because your boundaries force them to confront their own behavior. And not everyone is ready for that, but those who truly respect you will adjust. They will learn to interact with the real you, not the version of you that's always agreeable. They will begin to meet you at the level you hold for yourself. And those who don't, they were never meant to stay. You'll realize that losing people who don't honor your boundaries is not a loss, it's alignment. It creates space for the right kind of people, those who recognize and value your integrity. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't have to be aggressive to be respected. You just need to be clear, calm, and consistent. The strength lies not in how many people like you, but in how well you honor yourself. When you respect your own boundaries, the world starts to follow your lead. You stop trying to manage how others see you and start living from how you see yourself. And in that space, respect is no longer something you seek. It becomes something you naturally attract. What you allow is what will continue. This principle applies to every relationship, every interaction, and every pattern in your life. People will treat you based on the standards you uphold, not the expectations you silently carry. When you tolerate being interrupted, you teach others that your words are not important. When you stay silent in the face of disrespect, you give permission for that behavior to repeat. When you consistently put others' needs before your own without ever voicing your own, you teach the world that your needs don't matter. Whether you realize it or not, you are always communicating through your choices, your silence, your reactions, and your boundaries. It begins with small things. You might let someone speak over you in a meeting. You might agree to plans you don't want to attend. You might say it's fine when it's really not. And while each act on its own may seem minor, together they create a pattern. And patterns become habits. And habits shape the way people perceive and interact with you. You may think you're being nice, patient, or understanding, but what you're really doing is teaching others how to treat you. You are showing them what's acceptable, and if you don't put a stop to what feels wrong early on, that behavior becomes normalized. Every time you allow something that doesn't sit right with you, you reinforce a message, not only to others, but to yourself. That message is, your comfort can wait, your needs are negotiable, your feelings are secondary. Over time, this message becomes a belief. You begin to shrink in spaces where you once stood tall. You begin to doubt your own right to speak up, to say no, to walk away. And the more you give in, the more difficult it becomes to reclaim that power. Because people will resist change when it threatens their comfort, especially when they've benefited from your lack of boundaries. You might notice that the same problems keep showing up in different relationships, different faces, same energy, the same feeling of being used, unheard, or taken for granted. That repetition isn't coincidence, it's reflection. Life will keep sending you the same lesson until you learn it, and the lesson is always rooted in self-respect. When you start holding yourself to a higher standard, you raise the standard for everyone around you. You stop asking, why do they treat me this way? And start asking, why did I accept this for so long? To change this pattern, you must first acknowledge your role in it, not with guilt or blame, but with clarity. You have more power than you think. You are not a passive participant in your own life. You are a mirror, and the energy you allow in will always reflect the energy you believe you deserve. That means if you accept half effort, you'll receive it. If you tolerate disrespect, you'll invite more of it. But if you draw the line, calmly, consistently, and without apology, you shift the entire dynamic. It doesn't require anger. It doesn't require drama. It simply requires awareness and action. When something doesn't feel right, you name it. When a pattern repeats that drains you, you step back. When someone crosses a line, you enforce your boundary. Not once, not occasionally, but every time. Because consistency is what builds new habits, new respect, and new energy in your life. At first, this shift can feel uncomfortable. You may fear losing connections. You may feel guilt for saying no or holding someone accountable, but that discomfort is temporary. What's permanent is the peace that follows, the peace of no longer over-explaining yourself, the peace of no longer questioning your worth after every interaction. The peace of knowing that the people who remain in your life are there by choice, not by your compliance, but by your truth. This is where self-respect begins to grow, not from grand declarations, but from small decisions repeated daily. Decisions like not answering a message right away when you need space, like turning down an invitation when your energy is low, like calmly expressing when something doesn't feel right. These actions, though quiet, carry immense power. They communicate that you are not here to be molded by others, but to live in alignment with who you are. You can't change how others act, but you can change what you accept. And when you do, the world around you shifts. People who once tested your boundaries will either rise to meet your new standards or fade away. New relationships, built on mutual respect, will begin to take root. And you'll find that by simply refusing to tolerate what no longer serves you, you create space for everything that truly does. You begin to live a life that pleases everyone but yourself. This is one of the clearest signs that you've moved too far into the territory of being overly accommodating, overly friendly, and overly concerned with how others perceive you. Slowly, often without even realizing it, your decisions start being driven not by your values or desires, but by the need to keep others happy. You say what people want to hear. You do what they expect you to do. You suppress your discomfort, your needs, and your voice because somewhere along the way, you learned that your worth is tied to your ability to avoid upsetting anyone. It may start with simple things. You say yes to plans even when you're exhausted. You laugh at jokes that actually bother you. You agree with opinions that contradict your own just to keep the peace. You give others your time, your energy, your support, again and again, without ever asking for anything in return. And while this may earn you the label of being nice or easygoing, what it really creates is an internal conflict, a constant state of being disconnected from your own truth, and that disconnect is exhausting. Eventually, you begin to feel invisible in your own life, like you're playing a role that was written by everyone else but you. Your schedule is full, yet your soul feels empty. You're surrounded by people, yet feel profoundly alone. You smile in public, but behind closed doors, there's a quiet resentment building, not toward others, but toward yourself, because deep down, you know you've been abandoning your own needs for the sake of keeping others comfortable. You start to notice that your actions no longer bring you joy. Even the things you once loved feel like obligations. You begin to wonder, what do I actually want? But the answer doesn't come easily because you've spent so long ignoring that voice. You've been so focused on managing everyone else's emotions that you've forgotten how to listen to your own. And that disconnection doesn't just affect your happiness. It affects your identity. You lose sight of who you really are when you constantly shape yourself around the expectations of others. Living to please everyone is a subtle form of self-neglect. It teaches you to prioritize harmony over honesty, approval over authenticity. And while it may keep things calm on the surface, it creates chaos within. The constant pressure to be agreeable, to avoid conflict, to maintain a certain image, it wears you down. You become so used to performing that you forget what it feels like to be real. Real with your feelings, real with your boundaries, real with your choices. It's important to understand that you can be kind without being compliant. You can be caring without being self-sacrificing. You can support others without abandoning yourself. True kindness includes yourself in the equation. It doesn't demand that you be everything to everyone. It asks that you show up fully, genuinely, imperfectly, and with respect for your own limits. Because if your kindness costs you your peace, your authenticity, or your well-being, then it's not kindness, it's conditioning. This conditioning often comes from early experiences. Perhaps you were praised for being quiet, for being helpful, for not causing trouble. Perhaps you were taught that good people always put others first, that love must be earned through sacrifice, that saying no is rude or selfish. These lessons shape your behaviors, but just because they were learned doesn't mean they must be lived forever. You have the power to unlearn what no longer serves you, to choose presence over performance, to choose truth over comfort, to choose yourself, not at the expense of others, but in harmony with them. When you stop living for the approval of others, something shifts. You begin to reclaim your time, your space, your voice. You begin to speak up even when your voice shakes. You begin to say no without guilt and yes without pressure. You begin to make choices that align with your values, not just with expectations. And the most powerful transformation happens quietly. You begin to feel like yourself again. This doesn't mean life becomes easy. There will be moments of discomfort. People may not understand the changes in you. They may push back. They may withdraw. But that discomfort is a small price to pay for the peace that follows, for the clarity that comes when your life finally reflects your truth, when your days are filled not with obligations disguised as kindness, but with decisions rooted in self-awareness. And that clarity is where your real power begins to emerge. So stop being too friendly, not because kindness is wrong, but because kindness without boundaries is self-betrayal. Every time you silence your truth to make others comfortable, you drift further from the person you're meant to be. Respect is not earned by constant agreement. It's built when you stand firm in your values. What you tolerate becomes your standard, and if you keep allowing what drains you, it will keep showing up. You were not born to please everyone. You were born to live with purpose, with clarity, with strength. So start choosing yourself, not with arrogance, but with quiet confidence, because the moment you stop living for others' approval, you begin to live with your own. And that is where your power truly begins.